Now, as we promised, after a little production snafu on my behalf, first time ever hosting a radio show by myself, I want you to listen to a little something from our next guest, John Dickerson.
The first campaign I ever covered when I was at Time, one of the bureau chiefs said, you always have to be looking for what is the question of this election? What are we trying to figure out? What are we trying to answer? What are candidates trying to answer? What's the public trying to answer? Because it's a national conversation.
John Dickerson joins us on AM 970theanswer.com. John, thanks for joining us. It's John Tabacco filling in for John Gambling.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. Hey, John, you're a legend. We know you here in New York on Channel 2 CBS, but you're known around the nation and the world for your legendary show, Face the Nation. And when my producer said we could have you, I was like, oh, holy cow. Let's get some real insight from somebody who's really been there on the inside. And in my view, I'm a purple person. I don't know if you heard us. We've been talking about how there's a blend between red and blue where probably most of America sits, and the fringes are all red or all blue. But I've always thought your work and Face the Nation's work to be objective. And we want to talk today about your great new book, Whistlestop, which is referred to by Crack as crack for political junkies. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Thank you. It's 19 different stories from presidential campaign history going back to 1800, and it's basically the stories. They're great, just tales about striving people in moments of where the stakes are large and turning points in campaigns, and where people have crashed and where they have risen up, and they're all just fun campaign stories. But what they also are is an attempt to try to figure out what of these moments tells us something about campaigns, the country, what's happening now. So there are all of these parallels between what happened in the past and what's happening now that made it. That's where a lot of these stories first came from. As I was covering campaigns over the last 6 cycles, figuring, saying, well, has this happened before, and when, and why, and how is it different from the past, and how is it the same, and what does that tell us about what we're going through now? So the book's it's basically got those in it.
Hey, the book is great. I got a copy hand delivered to me. I guess someone in your staff gave it to my producer, and I was going through it this weekend. And I know there are like these little taglines that we talk about, or you talk about in the book, where Dukakis is in the tank or Reagan is seizing the microphone. You talked about what these stories are as parallels to what we're seeing now. In reality, is there anything in history that you could think of that could parallel Donald Trump's meteoric rise to slaying 16 polished politicians?
No, there's nothing like that. In a kind of, so in 1940, Wendell Willkie was a businessman who jumped over there were only really 3 other candidates. He jumped over them in 1940 and got the Republican nomination. But he was, as a showman and as a figure in the culture, he was nothing like Donald Trump. And when Donald Trump flies his plane with his name on it over a stadium that he's about to hold a rally in, it looks a little bit like a circus, and so that reminds us of the beginning of American presidential campaigning in 1840, which was a circus. It was a day-long parade. Everybody was drunk, and they weren't sitting around handing around white paper, singing songs and watching floats go down through the parade. So there are places, and we can talk about 1958 and 1964, where there are some other parallels that'll feel like today. So there is definitely those parallels in the past, but there's been no one like Donald Trump. And then also this race is unique because there hasn't been one since 1884, when you had 2 candidates who were so disliked by the public and where people really felt more than ever that they didn't like both options.
Nearly 66% of all voters, Republican and Democrat, dislike their candidate. So, yes, it is certainly a paradigm-changing election. But when Hillary goes out there and she has trust numbers that are in the 30s, and she just talks, she says she talked past Chris Wallace, and she short-circuited for a minute. All this stuff everyone's throwing about Trump, that he never circles back, he never apologizes. Do you think maybe Hillary is at some point has got to stop lying directly into the camera and just say, hey, I screwed it up and it won't happen again?
Well, she has said it's a mistake. Now it's unclear when she says it's a mistake whether she means it was a mistake to do it in the first place and why, or it's a mistake because it turned out wrong in the end, which is to say, it's caused all this trouble. So she said it's a mistake and won't happen again. So she has that version of that. It's what she's been where she keeps getting into trouble is where she tries to back her admission by basically saying, well, it's a mistake, but I didn't do anything wrong, which is what she does when she says, previous secretaries of state have done this, but they haven't, and they didn't have their own servers. When she said that everything she said is truthful and that Director Comey of the FBI said that. Well, no, he was talking about specifically her testimony. And
there's always I'm sorry, John, but it seems like there's always a qualifier. It's kind of like, when you're a kid and you fight with your girlfriend, she's sorry, but there should be no but. It should be, I'm sorry, I did it, and it will not happen again. Instead, she says, well, there's 300 people, and I can't possibly know what everyone is doing, and that's not what I want to hear. That's not what other people want to hear. But I know at some point before your fabled career faced the nation in time, you worked in the George Bush White House. And can you just give us a little view from your perspective of the son of Jeb coming out today and imploring Texans to vote for Trump?
Well, I didn't actually work in the Bush White House. I covered George W. Bush when I was with Time, and George P. Bush coming out for Donald Trump, basically saying, we go with the guy who won. He's in Texas, where there are Trump fans, and he wants to have a political future in Texas. It's an interesting split with the family. The Bush family. Think about it. I mean, not only did Donald Jeb Bush as an opponent, but he said that his brother George W. Bush lied to him, the country, and that's what led to the Iraq War, and that he should have been impeached for it. He said that in the course of the campaign. So that's pretty strong stuff. Even that's to the fringest of the left in terms of the criticism of George W. Bush.
I got that. I also, I think a lot of mud was slung. I'm not a full Donald Trump, supporter, surrogate, et cetera. I've been talking about it for a while. I'm one of the purple people. I have some of both in me. But, Jeb also signed a pledge where he said, no matter what, I'm going to support the candidate. So rather than Trump being accused, not by you, by others, of saying terrible things to Jeb, which may or may not have been said, and Jeb spent $50 million going after Trump in the same way, just not from his mouth, from his surrogates. Didn't he sign a pledge? Shouldn't he just, do like his son said and dust himself off, get back on the horse and be a leader?
I mean, I suppose the question for the Bush family, which has always been one that's had a reputation for loyalty, is that, at some point, everybody in the Bush family has to make a determination whether loyalty to the party trumps loyalty to the members of your own family. So that's a calculation that George P. Bush made that is different than the one, say, George W. Bush made, which is, George W. Bush is not supporting Donald Trump, even though he's a lifelong member of the Republican Party. So it's and I think it's probably, signing the pledge. I mean, if an opponent says your brother lied the country into a war, pledges have to have some, out clause, or else it wouldn't, so I think it's, in terms of, certainly there are a lot of people who think that Jeb Bush made a mistake by not following the pledge, but we hear so much about candidates, and particularly in conservative politics, of candidates not standing on principle, even when it costs them politically.
Right.
And so, in that case, it costs Jeb Bush politically. I mean, he doesn't have a future in politics anymore, and
That's
because
true.
a lot of people don't like that he went back on that pledge. So, it's though people may not agree with it, it's not an insane thing for a person to do when they've seen their family, and also his wife was attacked and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
so it seems like
I understand that. I'm protective of my family and my brothers. I probably would be torn on that philosophically. 12:48 in New York City. You listen to John Tabacco filling in for John Gambling on AM 970. The Answer. We have John Dickerson with us from Face the Nation. We're talking about his fantastic book Whistlestop. And John, just before you go, you're a national newsmaker, and just give me a, if you could, a minute or so. This weekend, right here in Staten Island, New York City, a local artist erected a 12-foot T painted with the American flag on it as a subtle representation of the homeowner support of Donald Trump, and it was lit on fire. Where an arsonist came and lit it on fire. Is that common, even going back to what you write about in Whistlestop of reckless, bruising 19th century campaigns?
I mean, not as a norm. There was crazy stuff done. I mean, you had a president break into the opposite party's headquarters, but no, that's outside the bounds of, you can't just say with that, like, oh, it's always happened, therefore this is a part of the tapestry of America. No, that's not
on
the edge.
That's not the fabric of America, right?
No,
I mean, even
right.
Going back into 19th century, I feel like both parties should kind of come out and say, we're taking it a little too far. It's not a food fight in the cafeteria. This is a principled democratic election. People should be able to express themselves.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
All right, well, John Dickerson, thank you very much. I hope everyone in our audience understands and respects this man's time and effort to come on with us. Fantastic talking to you about Whistlestop, and tune in every Sunday to here in New York City, Channel 2 CBS for Face the Nation with John Dickerson. John, thank you very much.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate it. Take care.